you can rehearse quite a lot in thinking, training your fingers, controlling what you're doing. Aha, now he is playing, now I should do this, which means thinking. Think about what I'm doing. But you can also act now. And stop the thinking, and as soon as you start thinking, oh, I just did that, I must stop. As soon as reflection or thinking starts, what we call thinking. Also noticing as being part of, which means the thinking that I think. Stop. That's all that is asked for. And it needs some time, and it needs a special training of the musicians. Most of the people, again, now I come to the pianist, he said, it's impossible, I think all the time. He said, what you're asking for is absolutely impossible. Well, I said, can't you stop? He said, no, I can't stop thinking. That's ridiculous. When I'm not here, then I think of my next concert, or I'm rehearsing the 10th piano piece in my memory. I'm always thinking. But I said, stop it. He said, how? And this was quite unusual because, these are the simplest things in life when someone says, I can't sleep. And I say, well, stop thinking. Then you will fall asleep right away. Or decide to sleep. Stop. And you can sleep at any moment. And most of the people can't do that. They haven't even thought about not thinking. Think nothing. Wait until it is absolutely still within you. When you have attained this, begin to play. As soon as you start to think, stop. And try to reattain the state of non-thinking, then continue playing. Would someone like to say something? Yes.
Why do you say that when you stop thinking, the mind is open to higher centers? Aren't you doing what the surrealists did with automatic painting in the 1920s? Now, they said if you stop thinking, you open the mind to the subconscious, to the unconscious. And you're saying you're open to a higher center. Is this because they were under the influence of psychoanalysis and you are of Eastern philosophy?
Well, all I know from my personal experience is that it has nothing to do with psychology, which means not with the subconscious or the unconscious in me, but we know from the results that they certainly must be conditioned by a superconsciousness, by something that comes into the musicians, because there's nothing in the whole history of music, or nothing that we have ever done before, that resembles the slightest bit to all these results that have come out of these texts. So it must be what is usually called the superconsciousness, and not the unconscious or subconsciousness.
You said there were similarities between different interpretations of your intuition.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Can you say a few words about the similarities?
Yeah, for example, in it, all the different versions which have been played start with very brief, short actions, sounds, and then one by one you get here and there a longer sound, and as soon as another one starts, it stops again. The longer sound starts, which means sounds are cutting off each other. And in all the versions, it also occurs that the superimposition of sustained sounds increases. You get a musician is doing something, and then another one starts playing a sound or a certain pattern, and then the other one is able to hold it. And then it goes very quick. It is not a very slow transition in all the versions, which I have heard, that then all of a sudden there is a situation arrived where they are obviously taken altogether by something that's in the air, and are completely absorbed by the sound and react instantly without thinking. They just do it, and then very dense structures come about. And then through these dense structures last as long as there's somewhere one of the musicians plays a sound that goes out of context. Then abruptly, there are long silences. And then they try to catch on, to carry on with what they did before, but it doesn't work, etc. Now I could tell you a little description. That's simply a description about the organism that is developing. No matter in which region, higher or lower regions, one could go even further in saying very distinct things about the layers, the change of registers, for example.
Are these texts available in English yet?
Yes, I read them in English, yes.
Did you ever have any sessions which, in your view, were failures?
Which means that we couldn't play at all.
No, that was, to your musician's creative sense, was rubbish. Or is there such a thing as rubbish?
Absolutely. The first sign for rubbish quality is when what the gentleman just tried to mention, when citations come out. I mean, when preformed material comes out, when it sounds like something, then we feel that's going wrong. And there is something working, automatic recording in us is spitting out all the garbage and all the recorded stuff automatically, and then we stop.
Have you any way of discerning oral rubbish from oral creativity?
Yes, I mean, certainly. Certainly. Well, in this intuitive music, it becomes the most obvious which musician has most control over himself. So that's very dangerous now to speak, you know. The musicians reveal themselves very soon if they are very physical, or if the physical and the spiritual are in a certain balance, etc. Musicians are taken away very easily, some musicians, in not listening. That is the general reason for rubbish stuff, which means rubbish is in that sense that they produce dynamic volumes which erode the rest for quite a time, and they don't realize this. So people become very totalitarian, for example, certain situations, and that creates very awful situations in playing together. And then the sounds also become extremely aggressive and destructive. Then on a very low basis of communication, or of production of sound, destructive elements begin to work. I mean, not when I hope we understand each other, that you don't mean simply ugly or more beautiful. That's it. Yes, when it goes very low, very physical, and very, bodily physical, and then very destructive in destroying each other. Then they play all at once. This happens, and this is one of the most important things I always have to remember, to remind them, and myself too. Don't play all the time, and don't get carried away all the time by listening and acting. Musicians, in particular now, after several hundred years of having been forced to play only what has been prescribed by others, once a musician starts playing in a group intuitively, they play all the time. And it becomes loud very soon, and they don't know how to get soft again, because everybody wants to get heard. And then, you can get loud easily, but how can you get soft? Because then you think nobody hears me anyway, so I could stop. And these principles of group behavior, group playing on...
So what you're saying is that values are emerging from this. Values are coming out from this.
Complete new values that we have not learned, that we have only in our group. When a new member is coming into our group, it takes a while until this new member can integrate into the playing.
Because of these interactions, there must be a critical number for this group.
Right. That's why I always say the mass begins with 7. I mean, the over 7 is certainly very big. It needs incredible personalities who participate in a group playing where the number is larger than 7, let's say 8 or 9. So the best number is 5, 4 or 5. And then with 6, as I say, it needs a lot of self-discipline to shut up for quite a while during the performance and to know exactly where the right moment has come, so that also solos and duos and trios occur and not only quintets all the time when there are 5 players.
Has this been tried, though, with a group that's been established for a long time, like a string quartet, for example?
No.
Do you need musicians? I mean, does the quality of performance have anything to do with their technical ability on their instrument?
Yes and no. For example, when you play with dilettantes, then intuition can't work well. That's what I have experienced. Because the tools, the instrument, the body is not trained, which means they become dependent on their bodies. They want always more than what they can do. And then it becomes rubbish again. Yes, the best is in such a situation if you have someone who doesn't need to think twice about any technical thing, what you see, who is completely master of the instrument.
How about with the tam-tam? Is that...
Yeah, but that's what I mean. Who has lived with the tam-tam for a long time. I don't mean master that he can play all the Liszt etudes. That is even very difficult to play with such a person, because he can't get out of the system anymore. Almost impossible. Except if someone really concentrates on getting away from all these pre-established techniques. What I mean is that he really becomes one with his instrument and knows where to touch and what to do in order to make it resonate, so that the inner vibrations that occur in the player can immediately be transmitted into outer vibrations in the matter of the instrument, can be transformed into acoustical vibrations. That is the whole secret, actually. The shortest way.
You're in a group about to react to a text. You think nothing. How then do you make an action to make a sound? And, do you classify awareness as a form of thinking, or is it separate?
No, thinking is, well, I know I do this, he does that. This recognition, this act of thinking, that is what I call thinking.
So how would you classify?
Even well, what do you mean awareness? You mean that I'm aware I'm sitting here and playing? No, also not. Just playing.
Are you
and
aware of the other sounds? Which, obviously there was some...
Yeah, all the
reaction.
time, naturally. You are the sound.
So you separate awareness from thinking?
You are the sound. Yes, thinking as a mental process, which is pre-planning, remembering, recording, calculating, all these different activities that the mental
yes,
does.
I understand that.
For example, we can decide, I have pieces where it says, now, think, make a plan, imagine the next event and then play it exactly according to your imagination. Then you first think a musical event, think it out, and then you play it.
But you are reacting to each other, are you? And that's what I mean by awareness.
Well, to what is in the air, actually. That's what we are reacting to. Or acting on. There's no reaction. We are acting on the sound that's in the air.
In your theatre piece, Oben und Unten, you asked the performers, before they rehearse or play the piece, first to play Kurzwellen, and for the actors to
hear it.
To hear it.
Play. Yeah.
To hear it. Why is this?
Well, I thought that would be the best training and stimulation. In Kurzwellen, the players have to react to something that is completely unforeseen, that comes out of the radio. They have immediately to respond to this material that comes out of the radio. And in that theater piece, I expect that the musicians also react immediately to the spontaneous verbal material that comes out of the speakers, of the man, the woman, and the child. And I expect also that the man, the woman, and the child say something intuitively that comes out of the sounds that the musicians produce. And in order to train this, the best is if you sit in front of the radio and react to this, and do whatever comes while you are listening to the radio, because there you cannot cheat yourself. Yes.
You said that you called your music intuitive because improvisation is always related to a system,
Style.
or to a pattern.
Yeah.
What about improvisation as, for instance, that of the Globocar group?
Well, he calls it improvisation. I wouldn't recommend to call it.
What would you then call it? Intuitive?
Yes, I would say
You think
so.
that Globocar would call
Well,
it
except that now we come either, what do you want to talk about? Intention or analysis?
No, I would like to know exactly where you draw the difference between improvisation and intuitive. What you call improvisation
Yes.
and what you call
Well, in the intuitive music, I try to get away from anything that is musically as established as still style. And in music that we improvise, that someone improvises, there is always some element, a basic element, a rhythm, or it has been in history, or harmony, on which you base the improvisation on. So in the Globocar group, for example, though they intend to play out of nothing, have nothing that is written or even no agreements, it is very obvious that the percussion player in this group every once in a while starts playing tabla rhythms which have occurred in Indian music. He has studied tabla once with an Indian percussion player, and it comes out automatically, these stylistic elements. So there is no pre-established style of the whole music, but certain stylistic elements come into the music. And I would try to avoid them, and to draw completely on intuition and try to avoid any stylistic elements. The same is true for Portal, the clarinet player. Whenever they come into rage, as I say, when they are heated up, he starts playing typical free jazz melodies and configurations that he has played for years, being a free jazz player. But there are certain idioms that come from the group that he played with, and in general from the free jazz tradition that he stems from. And then there you are in that style. So they don't intend style, but they have not eliminated these.
The pattern or system is part of the definition of improvisation.
Well, it has been historically.
No,
If you
it
want,
should be, it will always be, or it has just been.
no, it depends on us. If we call what I do improvisation, then we must say, be careful. The term improvisation now is very broad, and it is no longer related to any agreements. If you like to do that, I prefer to use new words in such a case. And I say, let's keep it that way. The Baroque music, the Indian music, the Balinese, no, not Balinese. Some of the African music, let's say music from Mozambique, is improvised music. And let's call this improvisation, and that's it.
And free jazz.
Free jazz, because the word jazz indicates they want a certain style. They want something that is limited what they are doing.
What I heard on your tape was Western classical music.
Pardon?
What I heard on your tape was Western classical music.
Aha. Western classical music.
Yes. I could tell that it wasn't played by people with... I could tell that their previous discipline was in classical music.
So what do you mean by classical? Then I'm completely thrown off, because for me classical music is something that has been composed. It has certain characteristics of rhythm, of harmony, of melody, of form, and I don't find any in this of our classical music.
I could tell by the gestures that they were sophisticated, socially sophisticated, the people who come out of this particular culture that we are sitting in now, as opposed to Eskimos.
Yeah, well, yeah, that is obviously the case. What shall I say? I mean, I can't.
So in that way, it is still improvised music because it is narrowed by that.
Well, yes. I mean, I can't help it. Yes.
Well, can you?
It's not improvised. But, well, then you say if someone comes from the serious and hears music of the terrestrials, he said, well, that's terrestrial music. No matter if they try to be as intuitive as possible, there is a certain channeling of intuition, obviously, on this earth compared to Sirius. Well, if you like to, yes, naturally. We are not universal yet. That's what you want to say. Yeah.
I can turn this into a question. Would you like to work with people with other musical disciplines?
Absolutely, we do. Yes, it's not just that I'm restrained to this group at all.
I think that
we are looking for I'm trying to get rid, since years, of certain players who can't get out of this, what you are just describing. I see the limits are too large. We have gone to up to certain limits, and now it's finished. I see they can't further develop. Their possibilities seem to have come to an end because they are also not working on their personality. I see they are basically limited. So I'm looking for others. Yes, badly.
This is the way of finding one's true inner culture, musically. This way you make your group for intuitive music.
Yeah, it's hard to speak about all this. It means basically to make contact, what always has been called the intuition. Only in traditional music we said the composer has a short moment of intuition, and let's say he is going in a tram or going on a walk, and then he lives on that for the next 4 weeks in working out what the so-called idea or that vision, that sound vision. And it was like a flashlight, like in the night, or like a lightning. And all I'm saying now is I try to find a technique for myself as a composer and interpreter and for other musicians who work with me to extend these moments of the lightning, of the intuitive moment, consciously. To find a technique that when I want to start working, that it starts. And that I'm not a complete victim and have to wait until it comes, as we say. And it mostly came in the wrong moments, when I had no time or someone wanted to talk to me, etc. But that I find a technique when the intuition can be started and stopped, and that these moments of intuitive working must last longer, and as long as I want. But then I have to find a complete new technique of making music. I can't sit at the paper with a pencil and sharpen the pencil and have a rubber and write down what's coming in intuition, because intuition has a very particular kind of speed, which is by no means congruent with the speed of writing. And there is the crux. We have learned now for 600, 700, 800 years to transform into the visual what we musically perceive intuitively, work it out into systems that we have agreed upon. Most of it is mechanical work, 99%. As I say, in all my works, there were very short moments that determined a whole section of several minutes, as it turned out to be later. Then I started working like a mechanic for weeks, and drawing it all out and calculating then the details, etc. But I knew what I wanted from the first moment on. So this is boring work, actually. And as everybody says, genius is 95% Fleiß. What is Fleiß? What? Diligence. And 5% ingenuity. Well, this should come to an end, this concept, I would say. It has been always like this. That's because of that incredible process that we got caught by it since Mr. Gutenberg, if you like, and then even before, since the monks who started writing down. It was necessary as a transition to fix it on paper and then give it to someone else as a kind of musical mail and send it to England, and there were people who could read it and transform it into sounds again. And this must stop. You see, now we don't need that mail anymore. I can fly with the airplane and go there myself, or send a tape and play it on tape, etc. So we must find complete different processes in order to find that time of intuition. and work in the time of intuition so that it can last, rather than I cut it always and have to chop and say, wait a minute, I have to write it down. And then it's gone anyway. This wait a minute has frustrated most of the artists, in the field of music at least, who were composers. And so far, I would say, more and more the traditional composer, as a writer of notes, etc., has come to an end.
What happens if you play this piece and you repeat it next week? What happens? Will you play exactly, will you not, surely you remember, you must somehow...
No, I don't want that anything
But would you not play
repeats.
a similar... I would have thought that having once played it in a certain way, you would be bound to remember certain things and play it similarly.
No.
You think it would be completely different?
No. Once you try to live, to follow intuition, you even try to abandon the repetitive effects, the mechanism of production.
So it would be quite different.
Yes,
if you...
certainly. Yes.
You mentioned the notion of writing something down and then getting a music idea, writing it down, sending a piece of writing to someone else who will then play it and produce music again. Well, in your intuitive music, is there a possibility, in your opinion, of recreating the intuition of the listener? In other words, you get the intuition from the music which is recorded, and then for someone who listens to this recording, transmit the sort of intuitive, meditative
You mean to have a feedback with the listener?
The listener, yes, and in fact connects with the sort of intuitive, meditative...
Absolutely. I mean, if there are people in the hall who emit bad waves, nothing works. And the stronger they are, the worse it goes. You feel very bad when you have a destructive public, or certain elements among the public who simply are antagonistic, mentally antagonistic, mainly, who emit waves that destroy whatever is building up. We sometimes have really given up in some places. The people don't know why, but we feel exactly this is not the place to stay, to work. That's impossible. I mean, to do something. Yes, the public becomes immensely important, but not in effect as they imagine nowadays. The great thing in the emancipated society is that there is not someone who's playing and the others are receiving, and they are fed by music, and that's it, which is fixed once and forever. That was the traditional one-way information in music too, as many people imagine it. And now they think, well, we have to bring whistles and to tap on the floor and to dance all together, or God knows what, to make the music. And then it turns into something terribly primitive in a kindergarten of sounds. Because the people are neither innerly prepared, nor are they really wanting to build something extremely extraordinary, but they just want to manifest, to get it out, to manifest themselves and to participate in a noisy situation. So when you usually do these things, they have been tried out during the last years, you hand out little instruments, or you say, let's make sounds together with the voices or whatever it is. Someone conducts it by, let's say, gives cues here, gives cues there, stops them, then all together. Or nobody is there, and we just do it together. My God, it usually turns into something that is, within a few seconds, loud, very loud, and then nobody hears himself anymore. And then it doesn't stop being loud. It's just a chaos. So there's a completely different way of participating in a new way. Sometimes you find it in Indian music. When a small group of listeners sit around and you even comment the players and say, yeah, you make signs. Then the player is wonderfully encouraged and responds. There is communion between the ones who are listening, and it doesn't matter really any longer who is then plucking the strings and who is building up the waves with his inner generator, so to speak. Forget about the physicality of always being haptically active with the hands or with the feet or with the tongue. We can easily, I think, once forget about this physical activity when we make music. And then we come to this incredible feedback that happens between beautiful people who are together, and when the musicians are together with such a public, the most extraordinary things can happen. because of the people.
Do you think it's possible for people who have no knowledge, higher knowledge of each other, to make intuitive music?
Absolutely. That's, yes, absolutely. It's like you can fall in love to someone whom you didn't know before.
I would have thought that really good intuitive music is very much dependent on a group's knowledge of its members.
Well, as the gentleman said, it can go wrong. That's something else. But yes, there can be a magnetism, which brings, which all of a sudden attracts people to each other, players to each other. They feel they are well tuned with each other. Yes. But then sometimes it may start, and then they feel, I was mistaken. He can't, or I can't, we can't. Yes.
Going back to personal style and intuitive music, that last piece that you played, isn't it recognizable as a piece of music that you composed in some way, as opposed to another composer who makes a text and an intuitive shape takes place, and yet you're still in some way trapped by something that's recognizable as your piece of music and not another composer?
Yeah. There's something at it. It is impossible to think for the people who have played up to now something that has my name, that I would not have existed, or that I would not exist. And the fact that they know that I exist and think of that I have exist, and that what they are doing has something to do with my name, leads them to specific things. There's no question about this, and all musicians have told me this. I mean, naturally, as a name, I'm a myth. There is a body, and it has a tag, and it has a name. When this body doesn't exist anymore, that name will be completely a myth. And around this myth, certain things are crystallized. That from the saying, what he said, what he would have done, it has already transformed into the many minds who have made themselves a picture out of me, of that myth. The myth, what I call a myth. And that myth creates something. So, but I'm a myth of myself, to me too, which means I'm not interested in that particular body or in my biography at all, because it is one out of many, and most of the others are more interesting than mine, actually. And also not in the name, really. The name stands for something that manifests through me. That's all I know. And whenever I do something, certain things must be right, the way I think that they should be right. So there is that certain integrity that manifests through me, that I want. It must be something that I can completely identify with. And the musicians who have worked with me, or even when they read a score or an article of me, they feel some of this. And they are striving to get that. Even if I would say, just play. I have played it, and not Mr. Boulez has said it. And that makes quite a difference. So with that myth, something has come into this world and will remain for some time, as long as people have that myth, or are possessed by that spirit. It is a spiritual force that manifests through one human being and affects many others. That creates a world in the world. There's no question about this. So no matter how free, as we say, in quotation marks, the instructions are, people say, it sounds like your music. But yes. Because all the works I have composed before are in it, too. They have encircled certain spiritual activities, musical activities. Yes?
So, with reference to that latest question, she said, can people who don't know each other, who are musicians, play well together? And that, well, I was at a lot of communes and that, and I know a lot of buskers, and they play well together. But with reference to that guy over there who said that your music sounded like classical Indian music, and you said that classical
European
music was music that was composed. Well, obviously you put them tapes together yourself, so you compose them. So don't you think that even now, or in time to come, that your music will be classed as classical music?
Well, the last sentence I haven't understood.
It is do you think that your music now will be classed, or in time be classed as classical music?
In task, what is that? No. Will in time, and then the verb. What is that classed? Aha! Oh, I see. Will be classed as classical music. It's a pity. It's music. As long as people like boxes, yes. Yes. And these boxes have very special reasons, as you know, in our society in particular. Because these classifications come from people who classify themselves. I say this also for people who classify themselves into the realm of pop. Certainly. There are also people who like classification or jazz or whatever it is. It's very difficult for people to get out of that class that they wish to belong to. Because they're all fighting against classes that are opposed, as they say, by the system. That's ridiculous. I belong to what I want to belong. So a free man doesn't belong to any class or to the class he wants to belong to. Another man says, I am in the class, etc., in that particular class. Or I don't like classical, or I like classical. Then he puts himself, or just using classical as a tag. It has economical reasons, social reasons. Classical people want to be in classical societies, a classical class, and classical environment, have a classical car, classical dress, a classical, yeah, it has a lot to do with each other.
So with your music, have you tried to make your own class for yourself, or?
No, I'm very pleased that the music, for example, as it is distributed on records, where I become fairly anonymous, just a name, goes through all the regions of taste and all the classes. So obviously, I have been very lucky in some way, be that my records are bought by pop fans and by people who like the classical music and people who like modern music and people who like Oriental music, etc. It goes through all the different, that's what the record companies tell me too. They say it's very amazing. I mean, we can't understand why. It seems that more and more the music that I have produced goes out of the realms of classification, or out of these boxes. We will see, I don't know. Perhaps you are right, after 50 years, they say he is a classical composer.
Can I try to specify a little bit, two questions we've heard tonight, with special reference to the piece S we've also heard. When we say we don't think, therefore the motivation for the sound is purely intuitive, what do you think would happen if you gave this music and this idea to people from another country, another culture, who had no contact not only with your music but with the Western avant-garde tradition, but who had very trained minds and were able to do this, to be able to say, well, not even a musician, just say a man, but say a musician, but a man who has a very high training, but nevertheless is not aware of the kind of sound you make. And what do you think is going to happen in this situation? Have you ever tried it? Have you ever?
He will play what he has heard. Which means it needs a very specific point in a tradition where musicians are able to step out of their whole environment, training, mechanics. So it needs a very conscious being. And he must know the music of the world, for example. He must be already a worldwide informed mind who has traveled, let's say, all the countries or heard records of all the other cultures in order to avoid this.
To play specifically that piece, for instance. Yes, because you have yourself made it knowing what you're thinking yourself. Would you say that for a musician to be able to play a piece like that,
yes,
it's important
I mean, what I could imagine
that he should know your music and your stuff well enough before he should play, so that someone who doesn't.
No.
Not so.
No. That not at all. No, that is not necessarily needed, but we could try it. What I can hear inside of me is that if I say don't think anything and then start playing, then I think he would just try out the strings of his instrument and stop all the time. I don't know it really. We have to try. But I think in order to avoid all the style elements, the brain functions as a filter. You see, when he is thinking, even during the piece, don't think. And when you have attained the state of non-thinking, start playing. The moment he starts thinking, he can think as long as he likes. And that's what we do while we are playing this. So we listen to each other and think, oh, what funny stuff he is playing. And then he, what is he doing? And so now I stop. Try to get that state again, and then I start again. Try to start again. Which means thinking is not excluded. It's always there when you are not playing in that piece. That's all that's said, which means thinking as a filtering. You can be very critical while you are thinking during this piece about what the others are doing. And that filters quite a lot out of how you condition your whole playing that is coming when you stop that thinking process.
I have a great optimism for that kind of piece because I feel that if all of us can stop our thinking and stop our emotion, the things that we're conditioned by everything that's going on around us, and just achieve a complete quiet in ourselves, that in fact what will come and what is there is the same with everyone, and the problem is to remove the conditions of the, the television and the newspapers and the advertisements and all that, so that if you took a piece like S to its end, it to its end, then perhaps one could say that the piece like that should sound the same, no matter who is playing it, if the person has the right mind, no matter where it's heard.
Yes.
And so I wonder if, because the performance that we heard is recognizably, the Stockhausen musicians, whether or not you feel that you haven't completely performed that work as it's written. I like the performance very much, as a performance of a Stockhausen piece, but I think it's a very special piece amongst those pieces, where the possibility is that the sound should not be recognizable of anything, because it should be the same wherever it's played, anywhere, with any musician, no matter what his culture, no matter what his background.
Well, give us a chance. You see, it's just 4 years in the history of music that something like this has ever occurred or has ever been considered.
Well, I understand that very well. But I was wondering if you thought of that as a possibility.
And none of the musicians that have participated in this sort of music has drastically changed his life yet. That is the pity. I mean, really drastically changed his life. They are all continuing as they lived and worked before, to a great deal. They have changed a little, all of them, more or less, according to the personalities. Some of them more, some of them less. They have all changed to a certain degree. Now, give it time. Give it a long time. Not just to that generation, but what's coming. Yes, I have great confidence in what's coming out of it, yes. These are germs. Thank you. Modern dance.
Because dance depends on music still.
Same. You can try the same in dance.
Can you relate the dances directly to the intuitive process of the musician?
I think so. Yes, I think so.
Without any trouble.
No, you will have all the trouble to get the mechanical movements out of the body which you have learned, so that it doesn't always look like a certain style. That is the problem. You have learned now a lot of things, and now it must be possible that the instantaneous action within the body can happen without that you immediately fall into a pattern of movement which you have learned before. It needs a process of freeing the dancers now from pre-established patterns. And one must be very dangerous, that's the same what this man said, that it doesn't become a new kind of expressionistic emotional dance, where you try to express the psychological processes that are going on within you.
But most dances come with recorded music.
You see, such people must become extremely... what is the opposite of egocentric? Non-egocentric?
Extrovert.
Pardon? Yes. Because otherwise you always play yourself. And what's in this self is nothing but a big bag filled with stored information and material. I always say people then start vomiting musically. That's when they are completely closed within themselves. Closed system. They just produce themselves. What they are. What are we? Just storage of information. But when you can become like what I call a radio receiver, and just a transmitter, then you are not interested in yourself at all. There's nothing to express, really. And you become very careful in detecting what is self-expression and what is expression of something that comes in you, that is amazing yourself, where you are constantly in a state of surprise, amazed. That you are amazed at something, what happens to you. You are not satisfied in expressing yourself, but you are very amazed about what happens with you and to you. And when this state is arrived, even in short moments, then you will be quite astonished what happens through your body. Then you become a medium.